So I'd like to welcome all of you to this webinar, as I believe it's called, concerning the wonderful film Around the Sun. I'm Roger Michell. I'm a charman and distant neighbour of Oliver's. It's with great delight, I would like to introduce you to the creative team behind the film that you, I think, have already all seen. So, Oliver, if I introduce you first, perhaps you could introduce your colleagues.
Hello, everyone. I'm Oliver Krimpas. I directed Around the Sun and produced it and edited it. And I'd like to introduce, my co-conspirator, the screenwriter, and a man who wore many more hats than that, Jonathan Kiefer. And then our wonderful actors, Cara Theobold, who played Maggie, and Gethin Anthony, who plays Bernard.
Hello, everyone.
So I'm going to start off very quickly by asking all of you to say where you are and how you're finding the lockdown. Are you working? What are you doing? Start with you, Oliver.
I'm in my flat in North London, and I am working, still on Around the Sun, just negotiating a deal for international sales. And then trying to get a few other things going, other projects that are proving tricky to get going, but there's a lot of optimism. And I'm finding lockdown to be really quite hard, a bit of a drag, but hopefully we're on the home straight now.
Cara?
I am in London in my house, and I am not working today, unless you count this as work, which I don't. It is a pleasure to be here. But I kind of feel weirdly like I've got used to lockdown now. I'm sort of very pleased that our industry can keep moving and things can keep happening, even in its strange new version of reality. But
have you managed to work a bit during lockdown?
I have, and I am also very lucky to have I've got a home voiceover studio, so I can do that as well, which is great. A few projects that keep getting pushed as things do, with things getting more serious, but hopefully I'm hoping this year is going to be sort of at some point feeling a bit more normal in terms of projects being able to happen.
Yeah. Gethin, how about you?
I'm at home here in East London, and actually, trying to make the best of everything. And work-wise, I've never been so productive on my own stuff than when I'm locked in a room and told I can't do anything else for a few months. So developing and writing has been great, and attached to a film that's been pushed about 18 times now. Kind of just sort of being grateful for the time at home with family, I guess.
Right. Jonathan?
Home here in San Francisco and with my family, and lockdown has been a challenge for all of us, of course, for the whole world, really. Not really making a whole lot of progress with work. However, I have been watching a lot of movies and shows, including the show that Gethin was in recently, Manhunt, which I binge watched. And congrats on that. That was really good. I enjoyed that. Catching up on viewing. There's always too much to watch and not enough time, but now we have a lot of time.
Indeed. Okay, well, let's start talking about this great film. I'm going to ask you initially, who found the location? Was there a location manager? And was there a kind of film within a film version of somebody rocking up at some amazing chateau? I assume it's in Normandy, is that right?
Yeah.
How do you find it?
So I found it because, and this actually was the genesis of the project, which was my best mate from school and his girlfriend bought a crumbling chateau in Normandy and said, come and make a film here. And that's what started the whole thing off. So yes, I found it. Unfortunately, what happened was in our first attempt to make it, we were about to do it. This was a year before we ended up filming it. And my friends broke up and the chateau became unavailable. So the whole thing collapsed, and we thought that was it. We thought it was curtains. And I found another chateau. It was surprisingly easy to find this other chateau, and we were incredibly lucky because we found this thing. It was 40 minutes down the road. It looked almost identical. It was within about 10 years of period construction, and we had very accommodating hosts who let us use it for a very reasonable.
French hosts.
They were French-British, which helped.
Right. So where did Fontenelle enter into the picture, or when?
Well,
in this process.
That book was written at the chateau that my friends had bought. So.
Oh, okay. So that your original friends owned the actual chateau.
Yeah, and it had a very, that was just one element of its incredible storied history, because everything that they talk about the history of the place is real. And that's what John really latched on. I mean, the Fontenelle book was what John really latched onto, and that led to his creation of the screenplay.
Did the Fontenelle idea come from you, Oliver? Did you then pass that on to Jonathan? How did it originate?
I can't remember who first mentioned it. I knew about it, but John was the one who took the Fontenelle idea and turned it into a movie. But maybe John wants to mention how that all came about. You know, how the movie sort of came to fruition.
Correctly. It began with Oliver saying to me, we have access to this place, and what kind of movie could we do here? And he sent me photos of the place and told me a little bit about it, including the history, which included Fontenelle's time spent there and mention of conversations on the plurality of worlds. I think I, sort of whipped up a dozen or so movie ideas, just sort of log lines, a couple of sentences each about possible stories that could take place in a place like that. One of which was a sort of vague allusion to the book, because the book was intriguing to me, and then I read the book and found it very charming and very contemporary. It spoke to these sort of cosmic themes that have always been of interest to me personally. And Fontenelle's book is, of course, essentially just two people talking, and we were in the mindset of trying to do something as minimal as possible. And so I thought, well, why not something that directly responds to that? And that made it sort of more specific than some of these other movie ideas, which comedies, rom-coms, thrillers, all pretty sort of generic, but this was such a sort of singular and kind of quirky thing, and it really spoke to me. So I just kind of went with that and took it on faith that Oliver would go for it, and then when I sort of fleshed out the idea, thankfully he did, and then we were off and running. At least until the original chateau became unavailable to us, but that didn't stop us. So here we are. Yeah.
Were you kind of briefed to write a two-hander?
Always an idea that we had in mind, that it would be as small in scale as possible. And I think there are periods where we had to sort of convince each other, Oliver and I, that it would work, that we could sustain a film with only two characters. And I thought, well, with Fontenelle as sort of a guide, through that territory, maybe there's something here. And also, I've sort of made jokes about how the movie is so thrifty that it recycles its own scenes. And that's really true, that it's, I thought you might be able to get some tension out of the strangeness of replaying moments, and having something change with each replay that makes you start to wonder what it's all about, and that could be kind of an engine of the forward momentum of the story, in a way that was thrifty for us. And so yeah, we're
yeah, I think it's very pleasing seeing these repetitions, these tiny alterations to scenes that are repeated, and it is a kind of puzzle, isn't it? It's a sort of Fabergé egg of a film. You have to burrow into the kind of patterns and the complexities of it. Did you, once you'd got Fontenelle and you'd got this chateau and you'd got the idea that there were only going to be two people in the film, was that in fact rather releasing for you as a writer? having those boundaries.
Yeah, definitely. The confines, sort of, you get into this tunnel of what it has to be, and all the other things that it might have been go away. So then you're sort of focused on making it work within the restrictions that you have, and that can be kind of liberating. And it was in this case. I think, Oliver and I had worked on another project before that was a bit more ambitious and kind of unwieldy by comparison, which we weren't really able to get off the ground prior to this. And there was some sense of frustration, at least from me, about that, and thinking like, well, let's strip it down to what's actually possible. And having done that, I think it was kind of liberating to then go for it. I mean, obviously, of course, it then depends on how he directs it. It depends, of course, on the cast, and casting is so crucial. And I'm so glad and grateful that we got these two wonderful people to be part of it with us.
Let's talk a bit about that next. So, Oliver, how did you go about casting your stars?
We did get a casting director. There was initially, I mean, just if I can just rewind a tiny bit, one of the things that John mentioned a few times was thriftiness, and we originally kind of modeled this on the Mumblecore guys, where the idea was that we would do something where we'd literally rent a couple of vans, find a couple of actors that we knew, everyone could sort of do it pro bono, and do it for almost nothing. The idea being always that we wanted to not have to ask anyone permission to make our film, and that was what had really frustrated us with these bigger films, and that we could just raise a few pennies and go and do it. Then once the new chateau came into play, that needed a bit of money, so it became a little more, the whole thing became a little more needing to be produced, I suppose. It needed a bigger budget. So then I'd been talking to agents and talking about actors that I knew, and then this casting agent started casting around. I confess to my shame, I didn't know either Cara or Gethin's work, and I quickly
so flattering.
Yeah, sorry, but I met Cara first. Cara did a self-tape, and it was stunning. And I just said, "Yeah, I think we've got our lady." And then she came and read with me, and I just knew immediately that she just seemed to be the embodiment of Maggie. And then Gethin had. It's funny because Gethin had auditioned briefly a couple of months before and then become unavailable because we kept pushing our schedule, and then we pushed our schedule so much that he became available and he jumped in last minute. They knew, well, maybe you guys want to take away, because there was an interesting element to your.
Yes, Gethin and I knew each other when I first moved to London. When I was 18, I went to Lambda for a year, and Gethin was there in the 2-year course. And so we have met maybe 9 years previous to filming. And so Gethin and I hadn't read together before with the casting process because of how it worked with Gethin being unavailable. It wasn't until I think you came on maybe the weekend before we started rehearsals, and it was kind of this last minute dash. And I got, I heard from Oliver that they're thinking of Gethin, and I was like, yes, I know him and he's brilliant. This will work really well. And on the Monday we were straight into rehearsals, which was great. And we found it's such an intense project, being just two characters, the entire film being dialogue, that it was so essential that we had not only like chemistry working together, but we had the same kind of approach, and we could rehearse and we could sort of be clear with each other what we really wanted to get out of the project and how we were going to make it work with just the two of us.
Talk a bit more about that. What were your kind of guidelines to yourself? What were your
I think the kind of one of the things that really attracted me to the project was the challenge and the responsibility of keeping, a feature-length film alive being mainly just you having a chat, you know, about these amazing things, but essentially you can't let any moment go. It felt in some ways like working on a play, really, you know, that kind of, especially since so many of the scenes, I think we actually had one scene that's 15-minute long, and we would run it as, you know, we wouldn't really do coverage. It would, most of the time we'd be, you know, just doing it like you would do a play. And Gethin and I, well, we had 4 days of rehearsals in London, which was really helpful. And we kind of spoke about the whole thing with Oliver in great detail. But when we were there on location, because there's so much dialogue, and there are these kind of repeated chapters and these themes, and often the dialogue's quite similar, we had to be so on it. I mean, you always have to be on it, but this had an extra level of kind of intensity, and Gethin and I found a way to always be really clear about where we were and what we wanted to do and how we wanted to make the absolute most out of every moment, because you just can't have even a second where the connection's not there, because that's what's holding the entire narrative together. So being in a sort of a team where you trust everyone and you're all on the same page was essential, really, and made it an amazing project to be part of. And I said it was a challenge, and it really was, but I also feel that it was a joy. The challenge was a joy as well, you know. I feel like we all really got to, we had to give it our all, and that was such an amazing opportunity to be able to be in that position where you do really have to carry every moment. And I
Gethin,
enjoyed it very much.
what did you feel, Gethin, when you first read it?
A sense of kind of wonder and who is gonna even dare try and do this kind of feel about it, with this kind of this, as Cara said, kind of Oliver hinted at it, the sort of moment by moment tracking of the story is really exciting, but it is a challenge. And so I sort of met, as Oliver explained, and was just fascinated by it. We had a meeting which was kind of wonderful and sort of involved, I think it was in your attic, Oliver, was that right? It was but it was just sort of one of those wonderful kind of like tearing it apart in that kind of joyous, like, what is this animal that I've just met kind of way. And Oliver was like just gently trying to probably clarify my thoughts and give me his take on it, which just seems so simple and clear and driven, because obviously they Jonathan and Oliver sort of the way this project came about was so organic, so it just seemed like, you know, we'd never met, and so it was fascinating. And then essentially at that informal stage, so there was a stage where I probably wasn't going to be able to do it, and then and also at that stage I think Oliver was able to share with me who Cara was at that point, and I did have this sort of wonder of like, well, this would be amazing, but it would be so key to have sort of an understanding with whoever plays Maggie, you know, a shared language or some kind of connection of craft, and that would be really exciting to meet an actress who's going to take this on, because it's such a I mean, daunting amount of material. That
was the first question to me, and what a lot of people said is, wow, there's a lot of dialogue, isn't there? That was the first thing everyone said, and it was actually one of the first things I said to John when I read the first draft. But sorry, I was interrupting you, Gav.
No, at all. But just to sort of square something up, which is that the rehearsals that we had were kind of wonderful. It's a bit of a privilege to get to rehearse anything on screen nowadays, but also essential. And I'm very grateful to Cara for running lines with me, because I came on so late that it really was she'd already done so much work to get on top of it, and then I really was kind of trying to tread water to stay alive. And Cara, that's a terrible metaphor, but basically Cara really helped me out, and I was really grateful for it. But there was something really fun about being in that place and all mucking together, and the crew as well. Like it was a small but very, very committed crew, and it was really lovely for that.
Talk a bit about the shoot. So how long was the shoot? How many days was the shoot?
16
days with Did you have weekends in the middle of that?
Yeah,
or
we
did you have
did, yeah,
6 day weeks?
we did 5-6-5, I think.
5-6-5.
Yeah.
And did you try and shoot it in some kind of story order, or
As much
was
as
it?
possible. In fact,
Yeah.
In fact, Gethin and Cara asked me if we could do that as much as possible, and that made complete sense. So we tried to do it as much as possible, but also
You went back to locations multiple times to do variations on scenes, did you?
we did. But I mean, the great thing about this chateau is you can turn the camera 30 degrees and suddenly have a completely different vista. So, you know, and we were all staying in a little jeep on the estate.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was literally a 70-meter walk to work every morning. And we had a couple of rooms in the chateau as our base camp. So it was all very, very contained. And yet you had all these wonderful different places. You know, you had the long alleyway of the trees and the bit round the lake. And that was all right next to the chateau. So it was really easy to just jump around. And one of the things I did, and I think this is probably the only reason we didn't shoot entirely in continuity, is that we started shooting at the beginning of November, and in November the days are even shorter in Normandy than they are here. And I thought we need to get all our exteriors first before the weather breaks. And we were really lucky. We did a week of exteriors in order, and then the weather broke. And so we then jumped inside, and then we just popped out for half a day whenever the weather was conducive to pick up bits that we hadn't done. But I think if we hadn't done that, we'd have really been in trouble, because not only did the weather change, the whole look of the place changed as well, because, you know, half the leaves fell off the trees in the first.
Yeah.
And so getting that kind of mid-season look, I think, I mean, it's one of the serendipitous things about it, that because we pushed the schedule so far, we had this lovely autumnal look with all the, you know, the palette of the outdoors matched the palette of the indoors, and the whole thing had this slightly dreamy, otherworldly feel. And of course, you have the sun very low in the sky at that time of year, so you have this really lovely buttery light. And I think all of that, these are all things I'd kind of thought about in my reference material and my, you know, my research for looks and things, but you never quite know. You know, I think on a film of this budget, you really, really are at the mercy of the elements much more. There was no, you know, there was no grips with 12Ks to, you know, pop a light through a window or anything like that when we needed it. We had.
What did you have?
Oh, I think we had one 1200 par HMI. That was our biggest light, and with that we lit the whole of the, you know, the period sequence at the back, where we lit the whole of the. That was our biggest light, and it was all, we didn't want a Jenny, so we got a local electrician to tie in, and just plugged in, and we had one guy doing all the lighting and gripping, and the biggest extravagance was getting a gimbal and you know, a run-in, and so I wanted to have the camera very mobile. Because
did you use Steadicam?
A run-in, a gimbal, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that like a Steadicam?
Yeah, it's like a Movi. Have you used a Movi?
No.
It's like a Steadicam, but it's
a cut price Steadicam.
It's a cut price Steadicam, but it also does other things, because it keeps it smoother, so it can actually make it feel more like a track.
Okay.
But it was very, I'm sorry not to get into all the technical stuff, but it was very, very stripped down. But one of the things that, of course, having this much dialogue, I thought it was very important to try and make it, and whatever it means, to try and make it as cinematic as possible, and to have the, as they sort of pushed through the story, that we were literally pushing into it ourselves. And so I had this very early on, I thought, we've always got to be moving forward in this film. And then there's, of course, there's the motif of the around and the spinning around, and they're spinning around each other and spinning around the
orbiting. Yeah. Great. Jonathan, let's go back to you for a second before we open it out to our BAFTA alumni. Did you have points of reference in other films or plays? I mean, it reminded me a lot of plays that I've seen, which are plays like Arcadia, I suppose, is an obvious example of a play with several timescales, and a play that's interested in science. Humble Boy reminded me of Constellations. They're all plays, they're all sort of science plays, which are based around relationships between two people. and I thought this was a very appealing, joining that group in a very nice way.
So I take that as a compliment.
You
Yeah, I
should.
mean, some of those plays and others were in my mind and in my background. I mean, I sort of came up in theater a little bit when I was younger, and I think when Oliver and I first met, we were in school together, and I think I was in a play in university, and the director maybe arranged for us to meet so that because he was his thesis film, and I acted in that. And I, since then, that was a long time ago, I've sort of missed the theater, and I mean, I love cinema. I've worked as a film critic for a long time, and cinema has been part of my life for a long time. But there's something about the kind of intimacy of theater that really speaks to me, and I that's sort of in my blood, I guess. But also, I mean, there are cinematic precedents for this kind of thing. I mean, I probably at some point had to get over the idea that, oh, well, you're making a movie and is it going to be too much like a play? I mean, you hear people say that movies are too much like plays or too much like books or whatever it is. It's like, well, why can't they be? I mean, it's what really matters is how you use time and how you use space, which in cinema is unfortunately two-dimensional as opposed to theater. But I like listening to people talk, and I like the cinema that finds ways to use that, and there are precedents for that, including the South Korean director Hong Sang-soo, who makes very small scale films that usually just involve 2 or 3 characters in 1 or 2 locations talking about life and their relationships, and sometimes those films have structural sort of switchbacks that make you stop and think about what's actually happening, which I find interesting. Not everybody does. Or Abbas Kiarostami, of course, the Iranian filmmaker who has made lots of films that I think are sort of self-reflective in a kind of similar way and very minimal in scale. There's something about, there are others, but there's something about that I find sort of unexpectedly cinematic. And I really think that, the people are the most important thing, the most important sort of element in any film. And we got some good ones. So that, I mean, these guys, I could listen to them talk. I could listen to twice as much dialogue from our leads than what we had. That might be asking a lot of an audience, but I don't know, maybe in the future we'll make that happen.
Okay, great. Well, it's time, I think, to invite anyone out there in the ethersphere to join us and ask a question. How do we do that technically? Does anyone know?
I think if they could put their hand up, if they could click the raise hand, then we can.
Can you see them, Oliver?
I can't see them, but I can see that they're there.
Well, that's very much physical.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to enter into your psyche on the basis of that. So, but if there are people who want to ask a question, that would be really. Now's the time.
Oh, okay. Yes. I do have a question here. We can actually, if you raise your hand, we can actually, Patrick, could you just make David Barris live, please?
Again, a very metaphysical statement.
The raise hand is the button, though, right?
Yeah.
Not just to.
Hi, David. I can say hi in the meantime. Hello.
Hi, nice Jonathan. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
How are you? Excellent. It's a very unique film. So I wondered about what the challenges have been of marketing it and getting it out into the world.
Myriad. It's I think exposure is everything. We seem to be doing okay. I mean, we had a nice festival run. It got very well received in the States, and so we had a nice festival run there, and then that leveraged it into being picked up by a company called Giant, and they did the release here in the States, digitally only, but that's fine because we're in a pandemic. And on release, we had a really nice clutch of film reviews, so that really got the ball rolling, and it sort of started marketing itself. But we also did and Jonathan very much was the brainchild, or this was his brainchild. I guess he was the brain trust behind this, which was from a very early stage, we started building up our social media profile on all platforms and really developing that. And that started, I think, before we were even casting. And by the time we did launch, we had especially on Facebook, we had a very large following for the film, just through word of mouth and people that had picked up on it at film festivals and just by digital osmosis. So by the time we did launch, a lot of people were, tweeting and Facebooking and regramming. And of course, Gethin and Cara were absolutely fantastic at spreading the word through their social media feeds, because as you can imagine, they have slightly more followers than Jonathan and I have. And then the success of that parlayed itself into the interest that we've had from various sales companies for international, and that's what we're working on at the moment.
Thanks very much.
And just quickly, it is definitely a challenge, and I think it's even more so going forward for smaller sort of independent films. Certainly it is the case here in the United States. I tried to leverage my experience working as a journalist and as a film critic to get in touch with people I know, colleagues who do that kind of work as well, and just sort of try to get any kind of press coverage we could arrange. And we had some good fortune that way, and some nice reviews, and also Q&As, and events like this are always very helpful. And folks who came to see the movie when it was playing at film festivals, who responded well to it, and were kind enough to get the word out. And it's a very sort of hand sell kind of movie, but people tell their friends about it, and then we sort of pick up a little bit of steam that way. And as Oliver said, our stars have nice, their celebrity gives them a bit of influence in social media circles. So it's always very nice when they let folks know about it. And some of their fans have been kind of with us for the whole ride, which is great. I mean, that's so touching to see that. And then, you just sort of keep going. I mean, it is a very small film, so every little bit helps. And I know there's so many things out there, especially now, and people have a lot of choices. So we just try to keep asking people to spread the word if they see it and like it.
What is the current release plan?
Well, it's out currently in the UK and the US, Ireland and Canada on iTunes and Amazon, and then in the US it's on a whole load of other platforms, cable and Vudu and things like that. And then the next stage is going to be, it's just being sold territory by territory by this new company that we're going with, and that's going to be a sort of over the next years.
Do you mean it'll have a theatrical release territory by territory, or
hopefully? It depends on the territory.
Well, virtual theatrical.
Well,
sorry, I don't mean to be vague, but we don't have anything locked in yet, but that's going to be happening.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I think there are probably chances of theatrical more in some places than others. I mean, France would be the obvious one, and I think the European art house crowd, I think, is going to be.
When did you make it?
We shot it in November 2017, and then we did post. It took a long time to edit, actually. So post, and we ran out of money. So as well. So post was most of 2018, and then festivals were a large part of 2019. And then towards the end of 2019, we were starting to get interest for distribution, and then that has a huge lag. And it came out in August. We've got another hand up.
Great, let's hear it.
It's from Jeff Norton, who.
Oh, okay.
I think we can hear you, Jeff.
Hey guys, can you hear me? First of all, everybody, well done on the film, and it's just a lovely little gem of a movie. But my question, I guess, related to Roger's question about theatricals, and of course we're all living through a pandemic, and most of us are watching films at home. But I'm curious for you, Oliver, or Cara or Gethin, if you had a chance to see it on the big screen in any of the festival runs, what was that like, and what surprised you? I mean, sometimes one of the joys is actually watching the audience, watching your film. I'm just curious if anything popped out or surprised you in terms of the audience reaction. Were you able to see it live?
Yeah, well, we had a screening for friends and family and crew in London. So we saw it on kind of a small cinema screen. And that was really fun and just lovely to sort of, the first time since we made it, to all come back together and sort of share that experience. But the first time I sort of got to see it properly is we were lucky enough to all go to Cleveland, to the Cleveland International Film Festival, and we got to have our premiere there, and got to see it in a full cinema with a full audience. And it was, for me, it was a strange experience. Like as the film begins, knowing that it is almost entirely me and Gethin talking, it was kind of, I was a little bit nervous to see what the reaction was, but it was really lovely. And it was a really warm audience, and it was just lovely to see that they got it and they got what we got, if you know what I mean. And yeah, I mean, seeing it on a big screen, it's so beautiful. I mean, the chateau, it looks exactly how it, on the screen, it looks exactly how it looked to be there. And it was just so incredibly beautiful. And yeah, it's a shame that more people can't see it on the big screen at the moment because of the world at the moment. But yeah, I enjoyed seeing it very big.
If I could jump in, I mean, I really believe in the theatrical experience for movies. And I think, paradoxically, the smaller the movie, the more it benefits from a theatrical projection, because of all those tiny little moments that just read bigger or read more deeply in an audience, and you can feel those rippling across the audience if it works properly. And so seeing it with an audience, and those little moments where you're in the edit and you think, is this too subtle? Is it too small? Is it too, is it too little to register? And they do register, and that's very satisfying. But also seeing it in a cinema, it's at 2K, it's projected, it's got surround sound. And I did spend a lot of time, one of the reasons why post took so long is I wanted to get the sound to be not super low budget sound, but to have a proper surround sound mix. And we worked very hard on getting the score right as well. And so I think those things are much more immersive in a cinema. And so the whole thing, I think the emotional journey was is deeper in the cinema, isn't it? I don't know if anyone agrees with me, but I saw it quite, between John and me, we saw it several times at different cinemas. And I think it was a really satisfying thing to do. Even if you've seen it several times before, to see it with different audiences in different venues and see how they reacted.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think the shared, at the risk of getting a bit topically nostalgic about cinema, I mean, the memory of sitting in a cinema audience to see any film right now does feel very special. And just actually for this project in particular, it was a bit nerve-wracking on the run up to it to feel if the audience were going to go with this. And as Cara said, and because it's such a nice film to share, and I mean that in its finest sense, I guess it's a warm place to be, that chateau, even in autumn, and the story that Jonathan and Oliver crafted. So it was really lovely to share it with an audience. Yeah, so that was very special, and it was a bit. Yeah, I think yeah, it was. It's not unexpected, but it was. Yeah, I didn't know what to expect, I guess. I've scared him away.
Yeah.
No, I think he's still there. No, I think maybe his
Any more
that's right. Yeah, thank you.
questions from the audience? Oliver, can you see any more questions?
I can't see any more hands raised, but please don't be shy. No, there aren't any more hands raised at the moment.
Okay.
I have a question.
Oh yeah, go on then.
That I've never asked. Jonathan, how did you come up with the job description, film location scout, for Bernard's first job?
It was out of practical necessity or something. You know, I thought, well, you know, we can. I think in the early part of the film, I wanted to acknowledge. I wanted the audience to know that we knew that we were asking them to spend a whole movie with these two people, and you know, it allowed for that bit of dialogue where you sort of discuss the book and. You know, so there's this kind of self-reflection going on there that's playful and you know, yeah, I think I wanted to sort of get that out of the way, that it would be, you know, what, obviously there are practical questions about like what would be the reason that this young man would come and, you know, spend the afternoons hanging around with this young lady at this particular place. And you know, that seemed like a pretty good answer to that question, but also, you know, it allowed us an opportunity to sort of acknowledge the artifice of the whole thing, and you know, start to raise questions about life versus art, or, you know, what's a movie and what's reality. And you know, location scouts are hardworking people. You know, I feel like we should give them, you know, some love once in a while. So yeah, that too.
Thanks. That driving around Normandy, Theobold. But also, just to add to what John said, when earlier John had said that we kicked around, well, he'd kind of come up with a few log lines for ideas of what we could shoot at the chateau, and quite a few elements of those ideas made it into this final script, including the location scout and the tech guy, but they were sort of more standalone stories that didn't quite, and at the time they seemed interesting to me. They didn't feel like a whole film, and that's when you know, some of those ideas sort of folded into the Fontenelle story.
I don't think I've ever seen a location manager as a character in a fiction, and I think location managers around the world will be enormously flattered and delighted to be immortalized in this way.
I hope I did them justice.
Yeah, more than knowing the location managers that I do, you did more above and beyond. So I looked at this quote by Fontenelle. We might end with this: "You must courageously offer your brows to laurel wreaths and your nose to blows," which I really loved. You have to be prepared for the kind of outrageous praise of the laurel wreath, and your nose is continually subject to the blows and insults of critical. I thought that was terrific, and I'm glad that your film has had only laurel wreaths, and I hope that that continues as it goes out into the world.
Thanks so much.
There were a few blows to the nose along the way. But...
Do we have time for another question?
Is there one?
Yes, there is.
Great.
Jonathan Lloyd. We can hear
hi there. Can you hear me okay? Hello, Jonathan.
Yeah,
hi there. I just wanted to say, I thought Gethin and Cara were so magical together. I just wondered if they had either plans to work together again or would like to work together again.
No plans as yet, but yes, I would like to, and I hope Gethin has the same answer.
I definitely do. The plans on my end are actually cooking at the moment, but I'll ask Cara first behind the scenes. But yeah, no, actually, it was a really wonderful experience, and I hope so. I hope we get a chance to at some point.
Yeah, I think there are so many times in a cast where you get to work with people, but it's so fleeting that being able to work just the two of us so intensely on, you know, on a whole feature was really special. And I haven't done other than theatre, I haven't done a screen two-hander of this size before. And so, yeah, I mean, when we were on set, we would have jokes of around the sun too, or, you know, around the moon, or some other kind of what would happen to them next, what happens the next day or whatever. So that would be wonderful, because when you have that kind of special connection when you're working, it's something you want to be able to replicate.
It is what the thing we were saying about having a shared language. If it feels, once you speak to someone in that sort of special craft language, you want to do it again. So yeah, we'll just have to come up with something, I guess.
Yeah, if someone writes something and put us in it.
Well, I think we'd love to work with both of you again.
Fantastic.
Oh, thanks.
We're in.
Well done, all of you. Thanks for
Thank
talking
you.
to us tonight.
Yeah, and just while we're still live, Roger, can I just thank you so much for moderating this? It's
my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
yeah, we're really,
Thanks, Roger.
really
Thanks everyone for coming.
You everybody, yeah.
Thanks everyone for coming for asking questions. Okay.
Adios.
Good night. Yeah.